Hey guys, welcome back to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 1 Prologue. The village hidden in leaves, Konohagakure no Sato, like the other great villages, had its own Jinchuriki. But unlike the Jinchurikis of other villages, Konoha's was not trained to be a weapon. He was allowed to live a normal life, normal as it can be. Villages have long used bijus as weapons to boost their military power. This was because of their great power. Tailed beasts had an almost infinite pool of chakra that no shinobi could rival. Ever since the times when Hashirama captured the bijus and handed them to other villages as means of balancing the power between the villages, tailed beasts have been nothing more than weapons for mass destruction. Balancing the power by ensuring that each village had its own biju was a wise decision to avoid other villages feeling weak and threatened by other villages. If other villages felt like this, they would be unrest and villages would start to fight. In the shinobi world, it did not take much for a war to break out. Trivial things that even kids would not fight over could result in Earth being fed human blood. Even when Hashirama handed out bijus to other villages, he maintained that Konoha would not have one. It was all in the name of fairness and the idea of looking good. But the village already had powerful shinobi, more powerful than anyone else. The Shodem himself was only rivaled by his former best friend, Uchiha Madara. The first Hokage was hailed as the god of shinobi during his days due to his legendary power. If they were to add a biju on top of that, Konoha's power would surely be greater. When Hashirama decided to give bijus to other villages as means to balance power, his younger brother, Tobarama, had tried to have his brother sell the bijus. The man worked his mind in a different way than his brother. Surely something as powerful as bijus would be sold at a high price. This of course would strengthen Konoha's economic structure, knowing that other villages would pay a hefty fee for the bijus. Tobarama knew this. He knew that other villages needed the bijus and would pay any price to get their hands on them. The bijus held great power and it was near impossible to defeat one. Instead, villages saw them as means to create powerful weapons that will boost the military power of the village. Many villages had tried to capture the bijus but failed miserably. Some did succeed. Hashirama, though, thought differently than his brother, and so he gave the bijus to other villages for free. He knew that the power of the bijus was great, but he could deal with the bijus if they were used to attack his village. His legendary Mokuton was able to restrain any biju without much trouble. Out of all the villages, there was also no one who could defeat him. Despite all his power, he was not too arrogant to hand out bijus because he could defeat them or had the belief that he could not be defeated by anyone. He disliked fighting and tried to avoid it all the times. That is why he gave away the bijus for free. Surely one would not think of attacking Konoha after all the village has done. He had used this as an opportunity to get the villages to cooperate with one another, but that failed. The Kyuubi had been the only biju that had been left untouched as it was too powerful than any other biju. When the other bijus were captured, the Kyuubi was not. Some villages tried to capture it, but failed. That was until Madara used his Sharingan to manipulate the great beast under his control. He then took the biju to battle Hashirama. It was during that battle that Hashirama took away Madara's control over the biju. And then it came to Konohagakure no Sato. The biju was sealed within Uzumaki Mito, the Shodai's wife. The Uzumaki woman became the first Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, but the fact that the Kyuubi was sealed within her had remained a secret that was only known to top village officials for security reasons. Mito carried the biju all her life. Even after Hashirama had died, she still lived on carrying the biju. She never used the Kyuubi's power, but merely contained it within her as Hashirama had deemed it too dangerous and powerful to be left alone to roam around the world freely. The belief only served to make the biju hate humans even further. When Mito was too old and her body becoming weak, too weak to hold back the biju, someone else was brought into the village of Konoha. Uzumaki Kushina was brought from the land of whirlpools, the home of the Uzumaki clan. Kushina had special chakra that could hold back the Kyuubi. That was why she was selected to be the Jinchuriki of the beast, the second Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Before Mito died, she passed on the burden of carrying the Kyuubi to the young Uzumaki girl with the words that she could conquer the Kyuubi's hatred through love. Kushina held the biju from her young age into her adulthood, never knowing that her only son would one day carry the burden she carried. Kushina's status as a Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi was also kept as secret from the villagers. Only the high-ranking officers within the village were told of this truth. For this reason, she was able to live within the village without suffering the fate other Jinchurikis face. October 10th, the fateful day the Kyuubi was forced to run rampage in Konohagakure by a masked man. Before that, Kushina was giving birth to her first child who was already named Naruto. During the time of childbirth, the seal containing the Kyuubi weakened greatly, and with enough force, the Biju could break free. To avoid something like that happening, Hiruzen Sarutobi had Kushina transported in the outskirts of the village while being protected by his most trusted Anbu. While Kushina gave birth, Minato helped strengthen the seal. But the masked man appeared and killed all Anbu before forcing Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, to leave Kushina behind so to save his son. He really had no choice though. The masked man took advantage of this and extracted the Kyuubi from Kushina before subjugating it with his Sharingan. Kushina was able to survive due to her tremendous life force. The masked man then summoned the beast into Konoha. The Kyuubi did much damage to the village and killed many. No one could stop it. No form of ninjutsu could harm it. The situation seemed hopeless without the great Senju Hashirama to subdue the beast with his Mokuton ninjutsu. But during that state, the famed Yondaime Hokage stepped up. But not before fighting the masked man. Minato appeared and teleported the Biju outside the village before sealing it inside his son, Naruto, who became the third Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Minato and his wife, Kushina, died during that night without being able to raise their son. But even so, they died smiling, having protected their village. And Minato held great belief that Konoha would treat his son well. Unfortunately, that was just wishful thinking. Naruto's status was made public, and this is how this life turned out. Chapter 1. Should have stayed home. Typical. They all stared at him like they had seen some monster. They looked at him with hatred that burned deep within their hearts. What sort of a monster was he then? When he was younger, he had questioned himself so many times. What sort of a monster was he? They always referred to him as that thing. So he was curious. Some things were better left unsaid, they said. He could see the logic in that. However, people tend to hide things that ought not to be hidden. He was a curious person by nature. Probing into the mystery behind the hateful stares and the silent treatment had gotten him far. Curiosity was not a bad thing, it never killed anyone. How could it be bad if he was merely investigating a mystery that affected his mental state? He could not possibly remain ignorant, and so he observed to satisfy his curiosity. The result had been a disappointment. But that did not matter, as he ended up knowing why. It was funny how the world was and how things played out. Konoha looked at him with burning hatred, great loathing. The villagers, young and old, disliked his very presence. Even his shadow was dangerous to touch. He walked about the streets oblivious to the truth while everyone else knew. They played him for a fool. For what reason? Simple, he carried the great nine-tailed demon fox, the destroyer of villages and a force of nature. He carried a beast that could level mountains under its paws. The Kyuubi was rumored to be a beast of infinite chakra. Immortal in its very being was hatred. The beast was said to have hatred that defiled anything it touched, yet he had been tainted with such demonic presence and the hatred had yet to defile him. Konoha feared the Kyuubi like a little child fears darkness. When a baby is crying because of the fear for what might be in the darkness, Konoha wets her pants, hiding inside the tunnels that lie deep under the Hokage monument. She cries for someone to help her, but her parents are both dead. Perhaps her caretakers may one day wipe all her fears away. Perhaps the villagers saw the nine tails in him. They saw the very thing that killed their loved ones, the very thing that nearly destroyed their village, the very thing that took away their beloved Yondaime Hokage. They loathed the Biju more than anything, yet at the same time feared the Biju more than anything. It was laughable that even the thought of the Biju gave them unspeakable nightmares. They say that he was a disease, and his presence in the village did not do them any good. Yes, he was no longer a child, he was not Uzumaki Naruto, he was not just a 13-year-old boy with no parents, he was just a thing they wanted nothing more than to get rid of. They spoke about the Sandaime not caring about their well-being for keeping him in the village. Yes, they wanted him gone. If he suddenly disappeared, they would probably throw a heap of celebrations. Despite the fact that they hated Uzumaki Naruto more than anything, they could not do anything to him, they could not touch. It was not the Sandaime's law that forbade them from speaking about the Kyuubi, it was not that they feared what the Sandaime would do if they rebelled. The Sandaime would be forced to side with them if they rebelled against his law. They knew it and the leaders knew it too, that the villagers made Konoha. Without them, there was no Konoha. Even with all that, they could not touch the parasite in their midst, they could not touch him. Why? It was simple, they feared him. No, rather, they feared the Kyuubi. They feared what he would do if they pushed him too far. Even in their blatant ignorance, they could still see danger when they see it. Not even shinobi dared to hit him or lay a hand on him. He was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails after all. The reality must truly make them feel hopeless. It was laughable to him. They hated him and would love nothing more than to see him gone, but at the same time, they could not touch him. Could, maybe not the correct term to use. The truth was that they fear the power of the Kyuubi and would not do anything that may awaken its power. Ignorance. It worked well for him. They did not know that the power of the Kyuubi was safely sealed inside of him. Unless he felt some extreme emotions or forced it out of the seal, it could not come out. Yes, the seal of the Uzumaki worked wonders. Minato might have been the one to place the seal on him, but it was the Uzumaki clan to devise the seal. Yes, they were that good in Fuinjutsu. If they knew this reality, he would be dead by now, or perhaps living somewhere. The Kyuubi would surely not endanger itself by allowing him to be killed. If he died, it meant a temporary death to the Biju. He doubted a prideful beast such as the Kyuubi would like it being dead. It was already an insult to its power and pride that it had been sealed within an infant. The other Bijus would surely have a feast about it if the great nine-tailed demon fox died. As it was now, he would not worry about such things. Perhaps when he was ignorant and oblivious to the cold hard truth that was right in front of his eyes, he would be worried about his safety. He stopped getting worried and afraid when he was 5 years old. He could walk within the streets of Konoha, carelessly, without being worried about anything or anyone. He could protect himself after all, and he carried the strongest Biju. Naruto sighed as he walked through the streets of Konoha towards the ninja academy. His footsteps were slow and were put down the ground like any lazy person would. Perhaps today was not a good day to go to the academy, Naruto thought mildly. He should have just stayed inside his apartment and spent the day reading something useful. He really did not enjoy most of the time he spent at the academy. It was still early in the morning. He always woke up early. 5 or 6 hours of sleep were enough for him. But sometimes he did sleep more than that. As long as he knew that his body rested and was afresh, he did not much more sleep. He could spend his time doing something productive. But lately he has been lazy to do most of his activities. He would have to remedy that before it became a serious problem. Naruto looked at the heavens. There is still about 30 minutes before class. I could get some ramen before class. But it did not matter if he was late or not. Iruka would probably just give him his lectures before allowing him to take a seat. He never really did listen to each lecture the man gave, and that always worked wonders in magically giving the teacher a vein on the forehead. He shook his head, slightly. It was barely notable. I will get some ramen later, he thought, proceeding towards the academy. But his movements became even slower. He had to kill these 30 minutes so that he does not bore himself when he gets to class and finds the seats empty. Finally, Naruto thought as he finally reached the entrance of the Shinobi Academy. He looked around the place, and saw that it seemed to be nearly empty of his peers. But his senses told him otherwise. He knew they were in class. Perhaps they had changed the time for when the academy starts. He put his hands inside his pockets and increased his pace, albeit slightly. The hall was just empty. He really did like it when it was empty like this. He could sense everything happening around him and could also think without having to fend off a glare coming his way. While he could ignore the glares, they did not make things easy for him because he could feel them trying to make holes on his back. It was not a matter of the glares being too much for him. He had gotten used to them that they no longer bothered him at all. Seeing a villager glare at him changed nothing of his mood. It was the usual business and nothing too surprising. He would probably freak out if they started smiling at him. Surely, that would make him uncomfortable. The matter was that he could feel the glares because his senses were honed expertly like those of a top shinobi. While he spent much time in the streets and forest of death, he needed to have such skills. The forest of death was a dangerous place if you were not a shinobi. One had to be always on alert for the forest that was alive could eat one alive. He used the place for surviving dangerous encounters. Perhaps he just liked the thrill of being in a place where he knew he could die. Having the Kyuubi inside of him did not mean that he could not die. No, it only meant that he could not die because of things that would kill normal people. He was not a normal person, thus he could not be killed easily. The Kyuubi could apply those high regeneration healing abilities to heal deep wounds that could kill him in seconds. He had always liked to see the expression on the beast's face when it healed him of those wounds. But the fact remained, he could die like everyone. The Kyuubi could only postpone his death, and when time came, he would disappear like everyone. Nonetheless, he was not worried about death. He did not even fear dying. He knew that death was part of life, and as anyone can be born into this world, anyone could disappear. A minute or two passed and he finally reached his class. He did not bother to knock on the door. He merely lazily opened the door with his right hand before placing it back to its rightful place. The class was packed always, and the others looked somewhat serious. Iruka was holding a stack of papers. A test. He really should give this thing some much more time. But he was going to graduate soon. How he did during the year did not matter. What mattered the most was passing the graduation exam. He had no doubt that he could pass something that silly. He had seen the exam before, and knew that it was not even a test for him. Morning, Naruto. Despite the happy tone in the instructor's tone, his narrowed look spoke other volumes. How nice of you to finally come to school. I hope it is not much a bore to you, but we are having a test today. So, if you could so kindly take a seat, others would like to start with the test. Naruto ignored the rest of the words. Morning to you too, Iruka-sensei, the blonde-haired boy said, smiling at the Chunin. This did nothing but to make Iruka glare at him even more. Naruto's smile became nervous. I will take my seat then. The rest of the class was oddly quiet. Perhaps they did not want to forget what they had read. Taking part of this little occurrence would not have been much a new thing for them. They usually did so when he came late or slept in class. It would be until Iruka quieted everyone down so that he could do the job he so loved without much noise to disturb him. As Naruto walked up towards his seat at the corner of the class, he felt a familiar stare coming towards. He looked at the culprit with a smile, and the girl looked away, red-faced like she had been caught stealing. It was the normal occurrence. She would stare at him while he was not looking, and when he stared back at her, she would quickly look away, looking flustered. Perhaps he enjoyed seeing the look on her face. Nice of you to finally show up, Naruto, Kiba said, in a low tone so that Iruka would not hear him. It would not be pretty if Iruka caught him talking while they were preparing for a test. He envied the fact that Naruto could come to school when he wished, but he would never admit it to anyone. His mother or sister would drag his ass if he decided to slack off. If I did not come, I would miss Kiba-chan ace this test, a bit sarcastic as he responded. He too, in a low tone that only the Inuzuka heir could hear. His remark only earned him a heated glare from the boy.
At least I am going to pass the test. I doubt you even know that there was a test today. The boy grinned madly. But the smile on Naruto's face did not go away. Kiba grinned because he knew the blonde was probably going to fail this one. Good luck, you will need it. Naruto's smile widened slightly. Thank you, Kiba-chan, for the wish of good luck. I can now write with confidence because the great heir of the Inuzuka clan has wished me luck. Obviously, the remark was purely sarcastic. To add to the insult, Naruto gave the boy a small bow of his head. Before Kiba could come up with a retort, Iruka spoke, in a slightly tired tone, yet firm. Naruto, I am waiting for you to take a seat so we can begin, the instructor said, looking straight at the blonde. Let us just start without him. It is not like it will make much of a difference, we all know he is going to fail anyway, a boy said, deciding to break the peace within the room. This of course earned some laughters and snickers headed towards Naruto, as the comment was being referred to his record. Iruka glared at the boy. Shinji, you should not be the one talking, the Chunin stated in a stern tone. You also failed your last 2 tests. Another round of cheers. Naruto ignored it all as he went towards his corner. He took his seat and looked at the peaceful sky through the window. Iruka started talking, giving the instructions for the test. Naruto was not listening. He looked at Shikamaru, who always sat in front of him. Why did you not warn me? I wanted to tell you yesterday, but you did not come to the academy. I could have looked for you at the usual place, but when I got home after the academy, I fell asleep and woke up today. That came the reasonable response from the Nara heir. Naruto nodded. This is going to be troublesome, the blonde said, releasing a sigh. He placed his hands on the desk before resting his head on them. I hear you, Shikamaru agreed with the blonde. Naruto released a yawn. I really should have stayed at my apartment, he thought as he looked at Iruka, who had started handing out the question papers, as well as the answer sheets. The blonde took the question paper and looked at it with a bored look. He sighed. Wake me up when there is 10 minutes left, he said to Shikamaru. The Nara heir merely grunted in response. Naruto closed his eyes. I am seriously becoming a lot lazy these days. I sleep during the day more than I should be, he thought as he drifted to sleep. Hokage's office. The Sandaime frowned as he watched Naruto drift to sleep. This was becoming a problem. He had noticed lately that nothing seems to interest the blonde that much. Lately, he wore his bored expression mask more often than he wore a smile. What kind of a 13-year-old did not become interested in passing academy tests? Other kids studied hard because they wanted to become shinobi. But Naruto has not been showing interest in passing the tests or even performing well. The boy's attitude towards academy work was dismissal. Who the hell takes a nap during a test? Those things stayed on your record. To a kid, good grades meant a lot. It made him happy when he was just a brat to do well in the academy. But Naruto was showing no interest in doing well. But then again, he had his parents to make proud. Naruto had no parents. Even if he did well, there would be no one to congratulate him. The thought made his frown deepen. If only Jiraiya was here, the boy would have someone to look up to, Sarutobi thought mildly as he put his crystal ball away. He would have to do something to get the boy motivated. He recalled that the boy did not even want to enter the academy. He had even started late than his age group. He had just pushed things through so that Naruto could graduate with those in his age group. There were some young fellas. The villagers had not been pleased with his choice, but he did not budge. He was the professor after all. Is there any other way I can become a ninja without having to attend the academy? Naruto had asked the Sandaime after a week of attending the ninja academy classes. He had been curious as to why the blonde would ask such a question. His curiosity got the best of him and he asked why the blonde would ask such a question. The response he had been given by the boy had shocked him. Within a week, the happiness of the boy had been sucked out by the walls of the academy. He had told the blonde that he had to continue with the academy if he was going to become shinobi. But now things were not getting any better. He would have to do something quick, without drawing the villagers' attention. The council would surely give him a headache if they knew he was interfering or giving Naruto special treatment. Well, he was special, and he deserved it. But the damn fools did not have the same eyes as he did. And it was a damn shame that they did not see the potential he saw in Naruto. If Minato had not died, none of this would be happening. But it had happened, and there was no returning back. He just had to make the most of the situation and ensure that Naruto became a shinobi, a good one for that matter. He would ensure that he did not fail Minato and Kushina. But he was running out of options. Naruto's class would go through the graduation exam soon. He was sure that Naruto would pass the exam. He did not believe that the blonde was stupid despite his awful academy record. Most trouble was caused by the hatred people carried for the Kyuubi. He knew that even some academy teachers were willing to sabotage his education, although they seemed to fail. They settled abandoning his training. But he had done well in making Iruka Naruto's teacher. He knew the Chunin was a good person. He thought Iruka would be a good influence on Naruto. But that was not bearing much fruit as Naruto did not appear to take interest in anything, from the academy. What made him smile was that Iruka did not treat the boy like other teachers he had assigned to Naruto before. The Chunin taught Naruto the entire things he taught the other students. The rest was really up to the boy. An Anbu made his appearance known to the Hokage. Sandaime-sama, I have brought the surveillance report you have requested, the Anbu said in the same monotone voice that all Anbu were famous for. Hiruzen held out his hand as the Anbu handed him the report. Once that was out of the way, he waved his hand, dismissing the Anbu. The masked man did not say anything as he disappeared into thin air. The Sandaime Hokage wasted no time in opening the file. He flipped through the first page. It just held the name, rank and status of the subject. He already knew all that information. What he was interested in was the report itself. He looked through each page with a critical eye. After all the reading, he closed the file and put it on his drawer. The Hokage then leaned back on his chair. As expected, there is nothing out of the ordinary, he muttered to himself, before sighing. This is all going to kill me one day, he thought, releasing a bitter chuckle. Shaking his head, Hiruzen looked at his paperwork. He frowned. The paperwork can wait, but Tuka-chan cannot, the thought, digging his right hand into his robes. Back at the academy, Naruto. Iruka yelled straight at Naruto's ear. He was glaring down daggers at the blonde. How dare he sleep during a test? This was not playing, for God's sakes. This was serious life and he was just sleeping. Not even Shikamaru could do that. Well, he would after he finished writing. But that was not the case. Naruto had yet to even start answering his questions. What? Naruto woke up abruptly as he suppressed a wince from the tone of Iruka's voice. It was really loud and not healthy for his ears. He settled for smiling when the Chunin hardened his glare.
Sometimes Iruka could be scary when he wanted to be. Seriously, Naruto, you have to start taking your studies seriously. Iruka spoke in a soft tone, never losing his death glare. The Chunin then shook his head. Start writing and I won't give you extra time. If don't finish, you will fail, again. With that said, the Chunin went down so he could observe each student. After Iruka had made some distance, Naruto looked at Shikamaru's back. He must be sleeping with his eyes open, the blonde thought. I should have done that from the start, and I was having a nice dream, he mumbled quietly before taking a look at the questions. History. Who are the founders of Konohagakure no Sado? Which two clans first settled in Konoha? Naruto groaned as he read the questions. This was stupid. If you got the first question right, you could not fail the second. Anyone who got the first question and failed the second is an idiot. Well, he could understand why the question only carried few marks. I should have stayed at my apartment. This is boring, Naruto thought as he browsed through the questions to look for questions that would be worth his efforts to answer. It was plain stupid to ask him who founded Konoha. To make it worse, in a test of all things. Everyone ought to have this kind of knowledge, it was common. Anyone who did not know it was just plain ignorance. I better start answering the questions before Iruka says time is over, Naruto said to himself as he looked at the clock. There was only 2 minutes left before the time set could be over. He had 2 minutes to write something. Well, it was more challenging this way. He then started writing. 2 minutes later, okay, students, your time is up, Iruka said smiling at his students. He was sure that he had set more than enough time for them to finish writing, especially when the answers were easy. He could admit it to himself that he had set an easy test for his students. He just wanted some who have been failing to get a morale booster by passing this one. He just hoped that Naruto had written something. None of the students complained about anything. They brought their papers to his desk before taking their seats again. Ah, crap, Naruto muttered. I forgot to write my name on my answer sheet, the blonde said looking through the window. He knew Shikamaru was listening. Normally, he wrote his name before answering anything, but this time had done things differently. Shikamaru sighed. I did not hear you, the Nara heir said burying his face on the desk. Getting into this kind of conversation would only be troublesome, and he would rather avoid anything troublesome. Naruto was just a troublesome person. The blonde raised up his hand. Iruka was quick to notice it. No, Naruto, you can't go home now, the Chunin said with a bit of impatience. Where did that come from? Naruto asked himself hearing Iruka's response. Was the man thinking that he had raised his hand to ask if they could leave? Sighing, Naruto spoke. That is not what I want, Iruka-sensei. What is it then? His impatience had now become visible to everyone in the class. Naruto could be so much annoying and troubling sometimes. He had many students to deal with, but he had never met anyone who could be as frustrating as the blonde. I forgot to write my name on my answer sheet, Naruto said scratching the back of his head while he gave Iruka was nervous smile. There were a couple of snickers and some mutters of idiot or something along the lines. But the blonde ignored it all. He did not care much for what the kids thought. They understood nothing, and only played the ignorant children. Fine. I will write it for you when I mark the papers, Iruka responded quietly. He knew Naruto's handwriting and would never mistake it. He also knew that he would be able to find Naruto's paper easily given that there was bound to be gaps of unanswered questions. Iruka sighed as he looked at Naruto. The blonde was already looking through the window. You can take an hour break. You will return to class after that, and don't take much time. Everyone can go now, except for you Naruto. You have already taken your break. Naruto sighed as he watched his classmates leave class through the reflection on the window. It was still morning. There was no need to go outside. He would leave if he had to take some time to eat, but he knew the mates who went outside were just going to be babbling about this and that. Sometimes he thought he was stuck in a 13-year-old body. He could not find himself enjoying the usual conversations his age group had. They bored him more than anything. Well, given this time, he may as well read something. You are not going out, Naruto said to Shikamaru who was still sitting behind his desk. He looked like he wanted to get back to sleep more than anything. He noticed that Choji had also not left the class. Then again, Choji was wherever Shikamaru was. No, the Nara genius responded, lazily. If I go out, I won't return. And my mom is going to be troublesome if I end up ditching class because it was too troublesome, Shikamaru said quietly. Even the thought of his troublesome mother gave him a headache. You will never stop fearing your mother, will you? Naruto questioned, smiling at his classmate. It was amusing that out of everything in this world,
Shikamaru feared his mother more than anything. It was also apparent that even his father was afraid of his mother. The Nara heir had no shame in making mention of that. He would probably never know since there was no mother in his life, his mother was already dead, so there was no experiencing any of that. Shikamaru was not the only one who was afraid of his mother, even Kiba was afraid of his mother. Well, he could understand why the Inuzuka would fear his mother, the woman was crazy. He had seen her couple of times. And she had no problems embarrassing Kiba in front of everyone. Sometimes he felt pity for the Inuzuka. No, scratch that, he did not. It was downright amusing to watch. Overall, the kids say that mothers were scary. He did not know any other, and would never see any of that. His own mother was resting in the afterlife. He could only hope that she was at peace. Maybe you should see her one day, and you will know what I am talking about, Shikamaru said in a low tone. He was careful not to say anything that would remind the blonde that he had no parents. It would not be a good thing to sadden his classmate. But then again, he had never seen the blonde sad before, never. There was always a smile. Sometimes it was neither happy nor sad. His eyes only reflected boredom, sometimes curiosity. I will pass on that, Naruto said as he took out a small black book and started reading it. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes at the book. Its cover was just pure black, and had nothing written on it. He had never gotten a glimpse of what was inside it. One thing was obvious though. Naruto always carried the book wherever he went. I thought you would be out eating, Choji, the blonde said, his eyes firmly on his book rather than on Choji. If I went out to eat now, I won't have anything to eat in the normal break, Choji responded calmly. But you are eating right now, Shikamaru pointed out looking at his friend. Choji shrugged. These chips are just the extras I came to school with just in case Iruka-sensei gave us a break after the test. And it turned out I was right to bring this bag along. My stomach would have been throwing a fit of groaning if I did not have this bag. Nothing further was added to that. Shikamaru merely closed his eyes as he prepared for napping, again. He had nothing to do. A nap was the best he could do. Choji continued eating his chips calmly, and in silence. As for Naruto, he continued reading his book silently. He read it until the others finally came back and took their seats. Iruka then came back to class, wearing his usual smile. Okay class, we are going to return to the usual schedule, Iruka stated looking at his classroom. I am waiting for Mizuki to get here so we can begin. He paused for a moment. He was supposed to be here by now, the man said to himself then to anyone. That did it for the class. They started making noise as they waited for the assistant to arrive. Mizuki was usually the one to assist during test and practical exercises, in the training ground. Naruto held no love for the Chunin. The man hated him. He could see through that fake smile he always plastered when he looked at him. There were times when he hated smiling at the man. His hatred was blatant, and he could not hide a damn thing. Some people did better in hiding their hatred. But the man was a failure in that regard. Mizuki will teach you for the next hour, Iruka said. The man then started talking. He was teaching more history. Sometimes he thought that Iruka only gave the man an opportunity to teach history just to mess up with the man. History was damn boring. He hated learning it, especially since he learned all of Konoha's history when he was just 7 and that was 6 years ago. Spending his time listening would only bore him. The worst part was that the man taught history wrong. He did not even bother to make it worthwhile. And so, Naruto drifted off to sleep. Later he looked at around the streets with a bored look on his face. They looked as lively as always. Deep inside in that liveliness was deep hatred that disgusted him. Of course, the hypocrites of this village did not please him at all. He felt disgusted just by looking at them, and if it was not for the fact that he embraced the hatred, he would have very well spat on their good-for-nothing hypocrital faces. Someone hit him. He had sensed the person coming towards him, but he had not thought the man would actually bump into him. The hit was enough to send him tumbling backwards. But of course, he could have maneuvered that. However, people were not expecting a 13-year-old to actually do something like that. And so he hit the ground on his back before looking at the man. Watch where you going, scum. The man ground out with as much as venom as he could muster. Naruto raised a ghost brow. The man had been the one to hit and actually moved towards him, hitting him on purpose. For a second he was tempted to curse the man and give him a chilling glare. But he settled for scratching the back of his head, while smiling nervously. Sorry, mister, he said apologetically. You better be, the man said, walking away. Naruto almost looked amused when the man said that. He knew that behind the growl was barely hidden fear. He could swear that the man might have breathed a sigh of relief when he walked away from him. They seemed to like seeing him crawling beneath them. They were a bit sadistic sometimes. But it was okay, he did not care. He looked around to see that almost everyone was ignoring him. But he did notice that someone gave a discreet apologetic smile. He nodded at the man and dusted himself as he stood. It was nothing new. He knew that not everyone in the village loathed him. He may be a social outcast, but there were some people who were at least kind. But they showed their kindness discreetly.
Sighing, Naruto made his way towards Ikaraku. He went around this time because he knew he would have the place to himself. By this time people did not usually come to the ramen stand. He liked it because he could eat peacefully without driving away some of Tucci's customers. He knew that some people would not stomach eating next to him. Yes, he was that disgusting thing that made their stomachs reject their meals. Naruto, my boy, Tucci said as he watched the blonde take a seat. How are you? Good, Naruto replied smiling, and you? I am good, Tucci responded. How was the academy today? Same old boring, Naruto said with a nonchalant shrug. It was boring for him. But in order to become a shinobi he had to attend. Well, at least it was going to end soon. He just had to endure for a week and would finally leave the academy and become a genin. Tucci sighed. You should at least be enthusiastic about it like other kids, Naruto. The old man said, knowing Naruto's dismissive attitude towards the academy. He had tried to get the blonde a bit more excited about the academy, but nothing had worked so far. Again, Naruto shrugged. Well, the graduation is coming soon. I will get through and become a genin. He held a large smile as he said those words. Do you think you will pass the graduation exam? Ayame asked as she came from the kitchen. Naruto nodded. It is easy. Only an idiot and one without acceptable chakra control for an academy can fail, the blonde responded calmly. I will get the usual order while you kids talk, Tucci said, walking away, towards the kitchen to get Naruto his food. He already knew what the blonde would eat, so there was no need to ask him what he wanted to eat. The atmosphere changed, completely. Chapter 2, a Megacure. Nagato sighed as he cancelled his rain jutsu. The jutsu was perfect in detecting spies within the village. It was compensation to the fact that his senses could not stretch out to the entire village. But he was a very good sensor nonetheless. Even when one could stretch his or her senses over the entire village, it would take complete focus and some serious meditation. As far as his intel told him, there were only 2 people who were better sensors than him. Well, he also had some ridiculous chakra control. For someone who had so much chakra as him, it was hard to believe that he could manipulate chakra like he does. There were no spies within the village or some unwanted guests. He made sure to deal with any intruder in his village. He did not like it when someone infiltrated his home to gather some intel. The village's security was of high level. It was nigh impossible to sneak inside. And even if someone did sneak inside, he would not take much time to realize that someone was inside this village. Even top spies knew that a Megacure was not a playing field. He doubted that even the infamous Snake Sanin, Orochimaru, could tempt his ire by trying to enter the village. He would slit the snake's throat and burn it down. This village was heavily protected. It was the ideal place to keep secrets. When you entered using the back door, you could never go out. It was the den of a lion. Once you entered through the back door, you forfeited your life. He looked at the streets of the village with an expressionless face. Ever since he took over the village, it has been raining peace. He had ensured that everyone in the village was safe and eliminated everyone he considered an enemy. Yes, there was no one who he even suspected to be any enemy. Even a suspect was not allowed to live. That is how he had managed to lead this village and hold on firmly as its leader. From the Third Shinobi World War, he had been the leader, the Omegakure. He had eliminated Hanzo and everyone who was associated with him. He did not want anyone to start a rebellion on his village. His organized assault on Hanzo had led to the freedom of Omegakure. Of course, he had not eliminated Danzo's army alone. He had his own army to command. It had been a civil war that stained this rainy village again. But at the end of the war, he had destroyed Hanzo, and that left aim in his grasp. Since he single-handedly destroyed Hanzo, and his remaining henchmen, and the fact that he had never been defeated in battle, the villagers of Omegakure had started calling the god of Omegakure. Well, he had started calling himself the god of peace. Still, the villagers never referred to him by his name. He had abandoned the name long ago. Only those close to him were the ones who called him by his real name. To anyone else, he was known as Pain, and to the villagers of Omegakure, Pain-sama. He was proud of the fact that many have not seen his face.
People have seen Conan's face, but he never exposed himself. His paths were the ones who always got to see the world. Even the Akatsuki members have not seen his real body. He only interacted with them using Tendo. He was not the only one who had a name from the villagers. Conan was also given a name. She was the Angel of Pain Sama. She had fought alongside him during the Civil War, which was now but a history. But word had not gotten out that their civil war had ended and in his favor. He had ensured that the word never got out of the village because he knew if it got out, he would have to deal with annoyances. Nagato turned around from the view and walked towards his office. He found Conan sitting down with her usually blank look. "Have you gotten a word from him?" the woman asked, looking straight at him. Nagato did not respond immediately. He first went to take a seat before responding. "No, last time he was here, he said he would keep his distance from us. He said that someone was watching him and it would be troublesome if he had to watch his back every time he decided to come here." "It has been 3 years, Nagato," Conan reminded her partner. Really, judging by his posture and expression, he did not seem to mind about it. He was not as concerned as she was. It was not that she was impatient, she was just worried. "I know," Nagato responded blankly. "It has been 3 quiet, long years. Ever since we dealt with the Obito issue, we have had little to do since the village was already stabilized. And the Akatsuki has been quiet. I have yet to speak to any member in 4 years." Conan nodded. "Well, that is not anything unusual," she said, referring to the fact that Nagato has not been in contact with any Akatsuki member. Sometimes they could go for about 5 years without contact. But when he called, it was back to business. "How are we going to deal with Obito issue? The time for moving again is coming soon. Itachi and Kisame are the only ones who know about him, since both were recruited by him. But Kisame is the one who has seen his face, Itachi did not, he only suspects something. Those two are the only ones who need to be spoken with since both will be curious as to why he has not made any contact," Nagato said, before pausing for a moment. "They will be told of what happened, and if they have a problem with it, they will be eliminated." Conan nodded, not feeling anything to the fact that Nagato was speaking about killing both Itachi and Kisame should they rebel because the one who recruited them is no longer in this world. Akatsuki did not accept anyone who betrayed them. I doubt Itachi will have a problem with it. The one who might have some reactions with be Kisame. I doubt he too will do anything rash, but of all the members of Akatsuki, Kisame was the only one who knew the goal Obito had for the organization. Nevertheless, he was not worried about it. It would be a pity if we lost them though. They are both useful to the Akatsuki. No one could probably replace them should we lose them. Have you already drawn plans for when we start moving again? We will not be moving in the same direction as we were before he came, Conan said. She was not the one with the dream. She was merely a pillar that supported the dream of Nagato and Yahiko. The latter had once said that Nagato was the one who would take Akatsuki to new heights, but it appears that Nagato always wanted to follow someone. Well, at least now he was not exactly following someone. We have already discussed the important details with him. He watched Conan carefully to see how she would react to this revelation since she was not there when plans were made. She was busy cleaning up a mess they had created while dealing with Obito. He got a raised brow from the woman in response to the revelation. When did that happen? It happened after we removed Obito. That was when he said he would not be coming here, Nagato responded carefully, so that he would not have Conan think that he was keeping secrets from her. He did not like doing something like that to her, especially given their history together. Conan nodded. I am expecting a delivery. With that, she stood up and left the office without more words. Nagato did not say anything either. He did not even watch her leave. He just drifted off to his thoughts. Konoha the Sandame sighed as he leaned back to his chair. The graduation was coming soon, and he wanted to pick the best sensei for Naruto should the boy pass his graduation exam. He wanted someone he could trust explicitly. Someone he knew would not drive the blonde into the forest to get him killed. If he got a jonin that held hatred for Naruto, he would have made a grave mistake. That person would surely leave the blonde to die if the opportunity presented itself. There were a few jonins he knew would not bring harm on Naruto, purposely. But he needed one that would be suitable for the kind of training the blonde would need. He also needed someone who could handle the blonde and subdue him if it came to that. He had no doubt that Naruto may one day be able to access the chakra of the Kyuubi, so he wanted someone who would be strong enough to deal with it. He just hoped that something like that would happen before he had told the blonde about his status as a Jinchuriki. As far as he was concerned, the blonde was oblivious to the cold hard truth. He had never told him and forbade anyone in the village from even saying the Kyuubi.
If one broke such law, death awaited. With the surveillance he has kept on Naruto and his very actions, he was positive that no one had told him about. Even though the blonde was not stupid, he doubted that he would have discovered the truth on his own. It would be something to dread if Naruto found out on his own and kept that fact from him. It was at times like this that he was thankful that the blonde did not come from the Nara clan. It certainly would be a disaster if the blonde suddenly says, "I know." He would probably have a heart attack if that happened. But just in case, he has put plans for damage control should something like that come to happen. The chances were low, but it never hurt to be on the safe side. Especially since he got the feeling the things may not be as they appear. Shaking his head, Sarutobi motioned for an Anbu to appear before him. "Get me Kakashi," with force. "Hi." The Anbu saluted before disappearing into thin air. Sarutobi knew that it would not be an easy thing to find the retired Anbu. The man could hide his presence very well, especially since he once was one of Konoha's top Anbu. The man was somewhat of a legend within the Anbu division. Added to that, the man would take his sweet time to get here. Sometimes he had to use force or remind the Jonin who he was. He may be old, but he was no weakling. 30 minutes later a disgruntled Kakashi appeared in the office. The Sandaime almost chuckled seeing the look on the man's face. Almost being the key word. "You called, Hokage-sama." As always, the man looked like he would rather be somewhere. But the Sandaime did not read much into that. "Yes," the Hokage said, taking out his pipe. If he was going to have this kind of conversation with the Jonin, it was best settle himself with it. He lit it and puffed out some smoke before fixing Kakashi a look. "Has something happened?" Kakashi questioned, seeing the look on the Sandaime. The look only meant serious business. So, he was curious. He would be ready for action if his services were required. "No," the Sandaime responded, shaking his head slightly. "It is about Naruto." Silence greeted the office. "Has something happened with him, Hokage-sama? Or do you wish for me to keep an eye on him?" Kakashi asked a few questions. Normally that was what the Sandaime would request of him when it came to Naruto. He knew that the Sandaime trusted him with Naruto's safety more than anyone in this village. "No, nothing has happened with him." The Sandaime brushed away Kakashi's concerns for the blonde. "What have you heard about him aside from anything that relates to it?" Kakashi looked thoughtful for a few moments before he finally responded. "I often hear other academy students calling him a weirdo, and a failure. I also heard that he has never passed a test since the year began. Why do you ask, Hokage-sama?" The Sandaime nodded to himself before responding. "I will skip the weirdo part and get to the failing part. Have you really observed him while he is at the academy?" Kakashi shook his head. "No, not really. Do it until the graduation. It is coming soon. Naruto's class will graduate this June since they were supposed to graduate last year December. Until then, the graduation exam, you will tell me what you have discovered." "Hi. Is there anything else?" The Sandaime shook his head. "You are dismissed. You will talk much with me after you give me your report." Kakashi nodded before disappearing. Danzo chose that moment to appear in the office. Hiruzen narrowed his eyes. He had stopped talking because he had sensed the men appear. "What do you want, Danzo?" "If you had given me the boy I would have trained him well. But it is not too late," Danzo stated, looking straight at his childhood rival. "Not this again." The Sandaime thought, feeling all his energy leaving him. He really was becoming tired and too old for having this kind of conversation with Danzo. The man was relentless and it was starting to get on his nerves that the man kept coming. No matter how many times he said no, the man would always come back, looking for a yes. "Academy, as you all know, your graduation is coming in a short period of time. But that does not mean that you will have to stop attending your classes. You will be attending until the day you graduate," Aruka announced, looking a bit happy that his students were finally going to graduate. "Aha." The class groaned at the thought of coming back to the academy tomorrow. While they enjoyed their time in the academy, they also liked spending time away from Aruka's lectures. The lectures could be boring sometimes. "Alright, before we take a break, we are going to the training ground to review what you have learned so far in practical skills," Aruka said, clasping his hands. He was obviously ignoring their groans. "Yay, we can see Sasuke-kun fight." At least some people were a bit enthusiastic about getting to the training ground. The said Uchiha merely stayed quiet, ignoring everyone else. "Come, kids, let's go," Aruka said, smiling, as he began to walk away. He had again ignored something. He was tired of fangirls. No matter how hard he tried to get the girls to behave, he always failed miserably. When it came to their affections for Uchiha Sasuke, The girls were a bit crazy and would not hear a thing. Naruto groaned. He disliked doing something like this, especially when it was all just academy staff. He had watched real battles. Battles could shake the very ground he stood in. Watching academy students make a mess of academy taijutsu was nothing but a bore. How could he downgrade like that? Perhaps he had been quick to watch everything and learn all that he has learned. If he had not, perhaps he may have been interested in this thing. He doubted it though. Are you coming? Shikamaru asked, looking straight at Naruto with a bored look on his face. The blonde was sitting as though he was not gone go to the training ground with the others. He knew that the blonde had to be forced to participate in the training exercises, or else he would just look elsewhere. Do I have to? Naruto, almost but whined like a child he was. I don't really want to watch Sasuke beat the crap out of our classmates. I have seen the scene many times that it is not even worth it anymore. Shikamaru mumbled something, before shaking his head. I am just gonna leave you. Trying to convince you to do something is troublesome, the Nara heir said as he began walking down the stairs. You know, Naruto, if you don't go now, Iruka-sensei is just going to come back here and drag you like last time, Choji said, following his friend from behind. Sometimes, Naruto did it worse than Shikamaru. Perhaps the difference was that Shikamaru was just lazy, while with Naruto, nothing just seemed to interest him. Naruto groaned again, before looking through the window, for a few moments. Well, it can't be helped. If I don't go, Iruka will probably drag me by my feet towards the training. And I don't want to mess my pants. I just bought them recently, the blonde mumbled to himself as he followed his classmates. He finally reached the training ground and found the others standing, prepared for anything. Naruto looked up at the trees not far away from the training ground. Oh, God, not another one, he thought irately. Well, at least this one is a little interesting than rest. But by the end of the day, he will have bored me already, he got a bit sad at the last thought. While all the thoughts played inside his head, his expression remained indifferent. He was just staring far behind the trees, like he was not interested in anything. The person at the tree had thought he had been seen, but when he saw that the blonde's eyes were not directed straight at him, he sighed in relief. It seemed that the boy was just diverting his attention elsewhere so that he did not have to be tormented by Iruka's lecture. Now that everyone is here, it seemed that he was just looking straight at Naruto. The blonde had been the last one to appear in the ground behind Choji and Shikamaru. We can begin with this session and take a break. Are you going to participate? Naruto asked, looking elsewhere, but he was talking to Shikamaru. The Nara heir never took part in any of these activities unless he was forced to demonstrate something by Iruka. No, it will be a drag. I would rather watch, Shikamaru responded. He did not like making demonstrations or being forced to spar with someone. It was too much of a drag to do that when there was nothing serious about it. Perhaps if it was a requirement of graduating, he would certainly do that. Well, it would not matter if Iruka forced you anyway, Naruto responded, never taking his eyes off the greenly trees. They were quite lively. Perhaps they manifested the mood Hashirama always had. It is said that he was always a lively person, and sometimes carefree. If he does force you, I have no doubt that you are just going to get yourself knocked out just to get over with it. Whatever works to get Iruka-sensei off my back, Shikamaru said in a nonchalant tone, before looking back at Iruka. Now I will need volunteers. And the faster we finish this, I will free you for your lunch. Iruka put on a good offer that he knew his class would love it. Unfortunately, no one wanted to take part. But the girls were not all that. Iruka, pick Sasuke-kun. It was not a surprise to Iruka that the traditional sensei was dropped as the girls addressed him. When it came to their Sasuke, those girls cared for nothing. They would probably threaten to kill him if he refused their demand. They had nearly mutilated poor Kiba when he had cursed their precious Uchiha, and Mizuki had also been nearly beat down. But the Chunin was a lot faster and quicker than them. Mizuki had made the mistake of sparring with Sasuke. He was trying to demonstrate the standard taijutsu stance to the class. Since the Uchiha was already good with taijutsu. The boy had been trained well before his family was massacred by his older brother. He also trained at home alone unlike other kids. So Mizuki went on to spar with Sasuke. He made a mistake by misjudging the strength of his kick. The result was an unconscious Uchiha and angry fangirls thinking that Sasuke was dead. Iruka could remember the day very well. Naruto had been laughing at the expense of Mizuki. The Chunin had tried to calm down the fangirls, telling them that Sasuke was alright. But the girls did not want to hear any of it. What was important to them was that Mizuki had hurt their precious Sasuke-kun. Mizuki had run about the training ground as the furious mob chased him. He had avoided them by using Shunshin to escape the academy. Iruka was sure that they would have put his assistant to the hospital if they had gotten their hands on him. Mizuki could not have retaliated because they were just children. Well, angry children. But it would have been seen as a bad thing if Mizuki fought back. He was just glad that no one had gotten hurt. But Naruto was greatly amused by it. Pick Sasuke-kun, Iruka. Another demand came from the chairwoman of the Nation Executive Committee of the Sasuke fan club. Iruka was thoughtful for a few moments. He realized that it would not end well if he denied that request, given the looks that mob was giving him. If they ended up rioting, he would have to cancel school for the day. He certainly did not want to do any of that. Okay, he said smiling. Uchiha Sasuke it is then, he said, much to the cheers of the fangirls. The dark and gloomy Uchiha then stepped out of the group. He looked so calm and carried the atmosphere of Almighty around him as he stepped forward. It was probably just another day where he had to show his superiority by beating another loser. It was often annoying. But he would never deny the chance if he was given. While he may not admit it to anyone, he actually felt good about himself when beat down his fellow classmates. At least give me someone who will be a bit of a challenge, the last loyal Uchiha grounded, quietly. Yet, everyone heard him. His words only served to delight the fangirls, much to his annoyance. Really, he wished they could just all die and leave him alone. Sasuke-kun is so cool, the stars, hearts and everything went into display. Naruto merely sighed, and looked away. He had looked back at the scene in front of him when the fangirls started placing their demands. This was something he did not want to see. Well, it was amusing back then, but now it was just annoying. He did not understand what the fuss was all about when it came to the Uchiha. The boy was cold. Maybe he should not be the one to say that. But that was beside the point. The boy was an emo more than anything. But, he was not much interested in the boy anymore. Any interest he had was lost already. Isn't someone going to go on and take on the emo? Maybe when someone finally beats his ass, he will stop being so damn almighty, Kiba said looking around at his fellow males. There was also the fact that the Uchiha took all the attention of the females. If he got beat, it might make the girls lose all their obsession with him. Naruto, why don't you do it? Shikamaru asked, with slightly narrowed eyes that only the blonde could see. Naruto shrugged. Nay, I doubt that I can land a hit on the great Uchiha Sasuke. You are damn right about that. I have a better chance of beating that bastard than you, Kiba retorted. Akamaru barked, perhaps agreeing with him. Apparently the sarcasm was lost to him. How did he miss that one? Choji asked looking at his friend. He knew that Naruto could throw some sarcastic remarks every now and then. This one just a blatant remark, and yet Kiba failed to notice. I have no idea, Shikamaru responded with a shrug. Naruto poked his chin. Perhaps, you are right Kiba. I mean you have a 0-5 record against Sasuke. You have had plenty of experience hitting the dirt. Maybe this time you will finally get it right. But if you do fail, you can always try again. I mean you just have to be embarrassed by the guy you hate the most in front of the whole class. Your mom might even find the amusing part of it. Kiba glared. Are you mocking me? Naruto shook his head. I don't know, he truly looked he did not know. Ask Akamaru, perhaps he understood me. I am sure he can interpret it for you. He seems to be a lot smarter and can understand human language better than you. Why did you say? Kiba asked taking a few steps towards Naruto. The blonde looked around, looking clueless. Are you talking to me? Shikamaru's sweat dropped. Kiba should have been used to this by now. Naruto did act like that when Kiba started to act otherwise. What is going on back there? Iruka asked, stopping Kiba in his tracks. Kiba, if you have so much energy to pick a fight with Naruto, why don't you come here and battle with Sasuke? Kiba turned around to face Sasuke. He looked at the emo Uchiha and then the fangirls. I think I will pass. Iruka sighed. Naruto, why don't you spar with Sasuke? Yay, so that he can demonstrate the difference between number one and last, another girl spoke, much to the delight of the class. Naruto merely looked away, not because of embarrassment or anything. This was all just boring. It was nothing new. He had been in a scene like this before, and last time he had walked away citing that he was bored. Iruka had tried to stop him, but he had disappeared from the radar of the Chunin. At this moment, he would rather be in his apartment than here. He looked back at Iruka when he realized the Chunin was waiting for his response. No. Iruka sighed, but before he could speak, Sasuke spoke. What is the matter, weirdo? Afraid you are gone hit the ground like others? The Uchiha questioned, with a rare smirk. So cool. Naruto rolled his yes, before looking away again. Yes. You have proven yourself to be the top student. I am no match for you. The sarcasm all but lost. I mean, who can defeat Sasuke-chan in his death glare? Not Lil, Olmi. I swear just by looking at you gives me nightmares. And there is also the fact that you might be into boys. I have seen how you stare at Kiba's behind each time you give it a beating. Apparently not. Kiba looked horrified, while the expressions on other males appeared like they were ready to explode in laughter. The expression on Sasuke's face was simply priceless. Naruto almost laughed. Almost. The mob was on an entirely different stance. They were glaring down furiously at the blonde, looking as though they were ready to mutilate him. Naruto, though, was not the least concerned. But for the mob, how could he? How dare he say Sasuke is gay? That is blatant blasphemy. A sin that is punishable by death. How dare you? Naruto just fixed the mob a nonchalant look that did nothing but infuriate them. Well, it appears that you are gonna have to spar with Sasuke, Naruto, Iruka said, a bit worried about where things were going with the mood change. Naruto sighed. It appears so. Sasuke-kun, show the weirdo who is the boss. Make him pay for that blasphemy he has just uttered. Sakura yelled, earning nods of approval from her fellow fangirls. Naruto had to pay, he had to pay. It was unforgivable that he called Sasuke, their Sasuke-kun, gay. Sakura could not even dare repeat the words the blonde had said. This is just going to be troublesome, Shikamaru said, looking at the mob that had been ready to pummel Naruto. They must have stopped from doing anything once it became apparent that the blonde was going to face Sasuke. They would have surely chased the blonde around the training until they could no longer move if it had not come to this. As far as Shikamaru could remember, Naruto had always stayed away from Sasuke's path. Even when Iruka wanted the blonde spar with the last loyal Uchiha, Naruto had last walked away from the training ground. The blonde never showed any interest in the Uchiha. While Sasuke settled for the mask of cold impassiveness, Naruto settled for the mask of blatant boredom, but most of the time it was indifference. He also carried a nonchalant aura around him. But what had changed? It was the first time he had heard Naruto make fun of Sasuke so bluntly. He made fun other people, but not Sasuke and the fangirls. If his memories served him correct, the blonde had yet to even talk to the fangirls. He always ignored them and looked the other way. But then again, Naruto ignored many things, as long as they were of no interest to him. He did not even know what interested the blonde. As far as he was concerned, the blonde showed little interest in anything or no interest at all. Sighing, Shikamaru shook his head. Thinking of an answer was just going to be troublesome. It was better to be at peace and allow things to unfold themselves. You think so? Naruto said, responding to Shikamaru. He then decided to get this over with so he can go away. He surely did not want to be here anymore. Perhaps he could see for himself what the so-called prodigy and genius could do. Well, at least, give them a show, Naruto. Today might be the last time we come here before graduation, Choji said before Shikamaru could respond. Yay, he is going to end getting beat like everyone else. If he even lands a hit on Sasuke, I will become his slave for a month, Kiba said, looking confident that Naruto could not even land a hit on the Uchiha. The blonde could not even defeat him, what more could he do? Naruto looked at Kiba, with a somewhat twisted grin that rang all sorts of alarms within the boy's head. Well, it only lasted for a second, only for Kiba to see it. Are you sure about that? Though Kiba felt confident, he surely did not feel comfortable with the grin Naruto had shown him. It was just wrong for someone to smile like that. He was sure even Sasuke would feel sick if he saw a smile like that. And no. Naruto sighed, how disappointing. And I was looking forward to having you as my humble slave, the blonde said, walking towards the waiting Uchiha. He certainly did look like he was disappointed. The look of indifference returned in full force as he went to face the number one in the academy. Remember that this is just a sparring session. Nothing too damaging. The message was clearly addressed to Sasuke since he was the one who has showed more skill than any of the students. The Uchiha was also quite brutal. He did not want anything hurting being done to Naruto. Sasuke nodded, quietly and settled to giving Naruto his famous cold mask of indifference. What infuriated Sasuke was the fact that Naruto did not even flinch. He just continued to have that look of blatant boredom. He did not seem to be interested in anything. If Sasuke was not mistaken, the blonde was not even looking at him. That look of nonchalance may seem like it was looking at him, but it was not the case. He was not looking at him. It felt like the blonde was looking down on him. How dare he? The thought infuriated him.
Who does the weirdo think he is looking down on him? No one did that to him. Naruto could see Sasuke's jaws clenching in anger. He silently shook his head. He had yet to say anything and the Uchiha was already grinding his teeth. What more would he do if he does open his mouth? Okay, you can start now, Iruka said, giving the boys the green light to start the session. Naruto did not move. He merely folded his hands across his chest, before looking elsewhere. Gah! One of the fangirls growled, pulling her hair. The audacity of that weirdo. He is trying to look cooler than Sasuke-kun. Sasuke-kun, you cannot allow something like that to happen. It is unforgivable. For once Sasuke agreed with the fangirls. He smirked as he got into a stance. Yet Naruto still looked away from him. He even let loose a yawn. Sasuke glared before calming himself down. He rushed towards the blonde, but grew even frustrated when the blonde did not even turn his head to face him. He stopped in his tracks with his fist close to Naruto's face. The blonde did not even twitch. Naruto raised a brow as he turned to face Sasuke's fist. Aren't you going to hit me and get this over with? Sasuke glared. You are not doing anything to defend yourself. You just want me to knock you down so you can get this over. The Uchiha spoke in a cold tone, clear that he was not the least amused. I see. I shall end this then. In an instant, Sasuke was down on the ground, hitting dirt, while Naruto was walking away. No one actually saw what happened. Perhaps it was because no one was expecting Naruto to attack. Even Kakashi, who was watching from afar, blinked in surprise. He did not see that happening. This second Sasuke was standing still ready to attack, and then the next, the Uchiha was eating dirt with Naruto walking away from him. What the hell? Sasuke yelled uncharacteristically, getting up from the ground. What the hell just happened? The fangirls yelled, echoing everyone's thoughts. The Sandaime was asking himself the same question. If he had been expecting that, he would have seen that. Can we get a replay for this? Kiba yelled. That weirdo could not have put the Uchiha on the ground. I must be dreaming here. Iruka-sensei, tell me that this is all just a prank. I am afraid that is not the case, Kiba. Iruka responded quietly. He was not expecting that to happen. He too was a bit shocked by the turn of events. Sasuke charged at Naruto while the blonde had his back turned against him. He delivered a hard kick on the blonde's back, before moving down swiftly to a leg sweep. The attack got the blonde and forced to hit the ground on his face. The Uchiha stood proudly, after exacting his revenge. This was much to the delight of the fangirls. Naruto sighed as he turned around to face the sky. I should have expected that, the blonde muttered to himself, looking all but bored. He was not hurt or anything. He was just finding it to be a task to get up after the Uchiha's dirty trick. Well, he had also played dirty when he tripped the dark-haired boy. Sasuke-kun is so cool. The weirdo had cheated to trip Sasuke-kun. Naruto rolled his eyes, while still lying down. Foolish girls, they did not understand the shinobi world. The world was not fair, nothing was fair. Well, he could not expect children, fangirls, especially to understand the real world. These girls wanted nothing more than fun with their Sasuke-kun. It would be a drag if he ended up getting stuck with one of them in his genin team. Okay, class. You can take your break, Iruka said, particularly to one, since no one was listening to him. The Chunin sighed and went to Naruto, who was still on the ground. He held out his hand to the blonde. Come on, let me help you out. Naruto took Iruka's hand and got up. Thanks, he just found the words coming out of his mouth. Iruka smiled at him, warmly. Are you hurt? The Chunin asked with some concern in his tone. What Sasuke had done was not allowed. He had been slow to act because of his shock. Regardless, he should have expected it from the Uchiha. Sasuke was like that. He had noticed that the Uchiha did not accept it when someone seemed to be better than him. No, I am fine, Naruto said, dusting himself up. Well, at least his pants were not damaged. He ran his right hand along his hair, getting a feeling from it. He sighed, his hair was not messed up. The Uchiha hits like a girl. He had experienced worse, but Iruka did not have to know all that. Iruka nodded. I'm glad you are not hurt. I will have to speak to Sasuke, though. The man looked thoughtful for a few moments. If you had paid attention to class, you would have known that you should never turn your back on your opponent. Naruto shrugged. I am just a 13-year-old kid, and this was just a little demonstration. I also assumed that once the Uchiha was making out with the ground, I was the winner. I did not expect that he would attack me like that. Iruka nodded. You were right about that. He almost chuckled though, at Naruto's choice of words. How did you manage that anyway?
Naruto merely smiled at the Chunin. A little trick I learned. When you can't beat your opponent with skills, you have to use your wits. So you have learned some things. I was afraid that you may not have learned anything since you are always sleeping at class, Iruka said, smiling. So you knew that Sasuke would not attack if you pretended like you were not going to defend yourself. He was not exactly pretending. But Iruka did not need to know that. He did not want to be scolded for nothing, pretty much. Iruka nodded. Join the others for lunch, he said, looking at the other students. The fangirls were already disappearing to follow the brooding Uchiha. Naruto said nothing. He merely turned around to leave. He placed both his hands inside his pockets and walked like he was being forced to do so. He was not feeling hungry, so he would just end up watching the others eat, or he could just throw himself to a nap. For a second I thought you were going to win against that brooding bastard. But I should have not expected from someone like you, Kiba said, making Naruto roll his eyes. What did you do to him anyway? Naruto shrugged. Go away, Kiba. Akamaru wants to feed you. That was all said in a nonchalant tone. He was really brushing off Kiba's question like that. Kiba glared, but before he could say anything, Choji patted him on the back. Cool down, Kiba. You know saying anything further will only make him antagonize you further. Come on, Akamaru, let's go somewhere, Kiba said to his pet dog. He held no ill feelings towards the blonde. They just played like that. Sometimes he won some rounds, sometimes he lost badly, but he would get back at the blonde. Why do you enjoy picking on him anyway? Shikamaru questioned. It is easy and it amuses me when he becomes infuriated. His retorts are always amusing, Naruto responded with a nonchalant wave of his hand. Shikamaru could not deny that, and so he said nothing further on the matter. You really did pull a fast one on Sasuke, the Nara said calmly. He could guess what the blonde had done, but he had to have been fast to pull it off. Thinking much about it would be a bother. You know, I know for a certain that you could have dodged that attack by Sasuke. Naruto shrugged. It would have been a drag to do so. Not so surprisingly, Shikamaru seemed to nod in agreement with what Naruto had said. Where are you going? To my apartment. I need to change my shirt. This one has some dirt that is glaring at me, Naruto replied, walking away. What a lame excuse to ditch class, Choji said, knowing that Naruto just wanted to go home. Even Shikamaru nodded at this. Naruto was not a neat freak, but he did like his things clean. If there was a way I could ditch class without my mom knowing, I would be leaving with you. This day has been rather dull and I don't see it improving, Shikamaru said, walking away with Choji towards their usual spot. Naruto said nothing as he started walking away from the ground. He was just going to his apartment to do something useful, or sleep. He sighed when he sensed something. Naruto, where do you think you are going? Iruka called out, staring at the blonde. He really did not want to have Iruka searching for him around the village. He just had to endure. Nowhere, he said, turning around. He better go around relaxing on his lonely tree. I thought so, Iruka said, smirking. You better not think of leaving while I am not looking. I will find you wherever you run off to. The academy teacher stated, going back to his class to deal with some things. It would be a drag if I leave now, Naruto muttered to himself as he climbed the tree like any academy student. He sat on a branch. Reading my book seems like a good option. Well, at least he has a good hobby, Kakashi thought, looking from afar. I do wonder what he is reading though. Still, it was hard to believe that the blonde wanted to be a shinobi when he showed absolutely no interest in academy work. Perhaps he just found it boring rather than anything. I am going to call it a day, the Jonin thought before he disappeared from his location. He did not think that there will be anything happening for the day. And he thought he had seen enough. He probably won't be watching the blonde tomorrow. Naruto closed his book when he felt Kakashi disappear. I wonder what the Sandame is planning, he thought silently. He then shrugged. I doubt it is anything interesting. He opened his book again, and continued reading.